London's housing market is facing a serious challenge.
There are no houses for the youngsters, and that's about it, really.
So this is the real UK housing crisis.
It's quite remarkable that you can trace most of the problems in this country back to Margaret Thatcher.
The government has secretly frozen the housing pipeline.
We have a housing crisis.
Blackstone have just acquired over £1.4 billion worth of UK housing.
Private rent in Britain now swallows 44% of the average wage.
If they wanted to teach you, they would, but they honestly have no intention of teaching you this.
You don't have any assets. Who's going to pay for your care? Your family? Well, no, because they're too busy working 3 jobs just to pay for their own existence.
Finding a place to live in the UK isn't just hard anymore, it's impossible. Rent is sky high, mortgages are out of reach, and the dream of owning a home? Dead, buried, forgotten. This is the housing crisis, a crisis where landlords raise rents faster than wages, where young people are trapped in their childhood bedrooms, where families are squeezed into damp flats with broken boilers, where homelessness isn't just visible on the streets. It's hidden in overcrowded living rooms, in sofa surfing, in quiet desperation, and the government still talking about affordable housing, still promising new builds, still pretending that a £400,000 flat is something ordinary people can afford. But let's be honest, this isn't about affordability. It's about exploitation. It's about a system that treats housing not as a human right, but as an investment. A system where homes are bought, sold, and hoarded while millions can't afford a roof over their head. The UK isn't just facing a housing shortage, it's facing a housing betrayal. And the people living through it, they're exhausted, they're angry, they're done pretending this is normal.
Can we just talk about the fact that houses in France on average are 160k. Houses in England are on average 260k if converted to euros. The average wage in France is 42k a year. And the average adjusted wage in England is 32, 34. So houses here are almost twice as expensive and wages are 25% less. And that's not accounting for the fact that food is more expensive, but the weather's significantly worse. What is going on here? How can people so adamantly defend the state the UK is currently in?
BlackRock have bought 1.4 billion homes in the UK in the last year. And I feel for people because as this private equity boom continues to sweep the UK, it will buy up all of our housing, unless it's in sort of prime central London, Mayfair. But even the great Hugh Grosvenor, the Grosvenor estate, has had to sell £360 million worth of his Mayfair estate. These are assets he's held in the family for hundreds and hundreds of years. Not even he can resist the might of the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund. So if people like Hugh Grosvenor can't even withstand the might of the capital entering into the UK, how are we going to deal with it? How are we going to own our own homes? How are we going to avoid falling into the PRS, the private rented sector? I don't think we can. Or if we can, the most important thing we can do right now is acquire whatever assets we can get our hands on. Because just as an effect of the amount of capital coming into the country, all assets will rise with the tide.
If you've got a generation of people that are renting now, and then these people are going to need to be looked after in their old age, well, that's going to fall on the state, isn't it? Because they don't have assets. Previously, you bought your house, you paid off your mortgage, you live in your house, you sell your house, and there's an asset that's going to pay for your care in old age. You don't have any assets. Who's going to pay for your care? Your family? Well, no, because they're too busy working 3 jobs just to pay for their own existence. And they're working later because the age of retirement's gone up. So suddenly you've got no care within the community. So it's going to have to fall on the state. And we're going to have enormous, enormous costs for care for the elderly in another couple of decades if we don't start looking at this housing crisis now.
So this is the real UK housing crisis. This is the catch-22. It's basically these bullet points. You need housing benefit to afford rent. You need a tenancy agreement to get housing benefit. Landlords who accept DSS are essentially practically rare. They just don't exist. They're a dream. Landlords operating cash in hand, they won't give you agreements. That's the loop.
Blackstone have just acquired over £1.4 billion worth of UK housing. Their total assets under management are now over $1 trillion. Companies like Blackstone, BlackRock have over $11 trillion worth of assets under management. Just to put that into context, there's only 2 countries in the world that have more than $11 trillion of GDP. That's the US and China. It cannot be underestimated how much power and influence companies like BlackRock have over our daily lives, our daily finances, our home ownership, our stock prices, every single aspect of all of our walks of life. These companies are not democratic. They don't have to answer to anyone. They don't have to answer to any third parties. Some might even argue that they actually influence some of the largest governments in the world. Look at UK housing right now. The Labour Party have a goal to build 1.5 million UK homes. Who do you think is going to finance those? We already know they're in conversations with these massive monopolies. They're going to be working with them to build up what we call single family rental units. So those 1.5 million homes that they're building, they're not going to be building those for you and I to buy. Those homes are going to be bought by private equity companies like BlackRock, Blackstone, and they're never going to see the light of day. The keys to the doors for those properties, they're not for me and you. They're for private equity who will then rent those houses to us. So buckle up, my friends. Looks like we are well and truly entering generation rent.
This is actually appalling, isn't it? Private rent in Britain now swallows 44% of the average wage. So for the average person in the UK, nearly half their wage is just going on rent. The average rental price outside of London is nearly £1,400, and in London, it's over £2,700 a month. I just can't believe how insane that figure is. If I relate it to my context, my wife and I spend about 20% of our total household income on our mortgage. That's take-home pay, by the way, not our wage. And what does that allow us to do? Well, that allows us to save money and obviously invest. That's what my channel is about. But if you're spending nearly half your wage on renting, I'm not surprised that nearly 40% of the country have £1,000 or less in their savings. We have so many problems, let's be honest, in the UK, but housing is an issue that's been ignored for decades. No, we're not talking about it. It's obviously hard to get on the housing market anyway. And if you're privately renting, like lots of people, you're getting ripped off. Let's be honest, it's not an easy problem to fix and it needs radical change. It would be ridiculous to suggest that the government should actually create more social housing. But also, and I can't really believe I'm saying this, but are we at a stage where we need rental controls? It's a difficult one, but when people are spending nearly half their wage on rent, something has to change. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. What's your housing costs like? Is it anywhere near this percentage? Before we go, don't forget to like and follow for more finance and investing content.
There are no houses for the youngsters. And that's about it, really. There isn't much more to say, as the politics are bad, the government is bad. We need a complete reshuffle.
Do you feel sorry for young people trying to get on the housing ladder?
I do, so much, yeah, because they don't have a chance, do they? There's no hope for them. I mean, where are they going to find 30,000 to put down as a deposit? Rents are incredibly high. So no, I don't think it's fair on them.
A lot of the people commentating on the housing market about advice given to young people seems to be stop eating avocado on toast, stop buying coffees. What do you make of sentiment like that?
Go to the young people who are single parents. They don't have avocado on toast. They'll probably be lucky if they get a piece of toast, never mind about avocado. So no, that's rubbish.
Would you have any advice for someone trying to get on the property ladder at the moment?
I can't give them any advice. I mean, what do you say to them?
Yeah.
You know, go and get a job. There are no jobs. Go and get higher wages. They don't pay higher wages. You go to university, you come out of university, they all expect high-paid jobs. They're not there. And the few that are there are snatched up, aren't they? The creme de creme.
The government has secretly frozen the housing pipeline. Yep, frozen it. Not slowed it, not stressed it, frozen it. Planning approvals are now at the lowest level since the 1980s, and that's according to national planning data. That's not during recessions, that's not during COVID, it's just the lowest it's been in 40 years. Why has that happened? Tightening rules, adding reports, raising compliance issues is nothing to do with the backlog of planning either. They haven't even addressed that yet, but it now takes longer to approve a home than it does to actually build one. So when planning stops, everything stops. Developers pause, SMEs quit, land values distort, supply just dies. So when Labour say we're rebuilding Britain, remember, the system isn't actually breathing, it's just frozen completely. Follow for more market truths and tell me, is this incompetence or a strategy?
Let's talk about renting in the UK, because for millions, owning a home isn't even a dream anymore. It's a joke. So they rent, and what do they get? A trap. Rents are rising faster than wages. Landlords are hiking prices just because they can. And tenants, they're stuck because moving costs money, deposits cost money, fees cost money, and most people don't have that kind of money lying around, so they stay. In damp flats with mould on the walls, in houses with broken boilers, in rooms barely big enough for a bed, paying half their income, sometimes more, just to keep a roof over their head. And when they complain, they're told to be grateful for the privilege of paying £1,200 a month for a one-bedroom with peeling paint, grateful for the chance to live in a system where landlords profit while tenants suffocate. This isn't housing, it's exploitation. It's a rent trap designed to keep people stuck, stressed and silent. And the worst part? It's normalised, it's accepted, it's treated like just the way things are. But let's be clear, this isn't normal. It's a crisis and it's breaking people, one rent payment at a time.
It's quite remarkable that you can trace most of the problems in this country back to Margaret Thatcher, Prime Minister of the United Kingdom from 1979 to 1990. Seriously, she is the reason this country is so bleak. For example, housing. Now, who do we get told to blame the housing crisis in this country on? Well, typically it's immigrants. No, it's Thatcher, because she introduced a policy called Right to Buy, which is where if you had lived in a council house for a few years, you could buy it off the council for a discounted rate. Now, that sounds like a good idea, right? Home ownership going up? Yeah, no. Because councils were losing money on the houses that they were building because they were selling them for a discounted rate, there was no financial incentive for them to continue building houses because they were operating at a loss. Hence why there is a shortage of social housing in this country. Another good example is public services. Why are public services so crap in the UK? Well, during the 1980s, Thatcher started privatising public utilities, which meant that a private company would run the service instead of the government. Now, the arguments for privatisation revolved around a better standard of service being produced because there'd be more competition for government contracts to run those services, and also that private companies were better at running the service. The exact opposite has happened. It doesn't matter whether you look at the railways, mail, energy, water, all of those services are failing. And why are they failing? Because there is more emphasis on extracting wealth and giving it to shareholders rather than providing a good standard of service. Next up, class solidarity. Now, Thatcher's war on the unions in the 1980s ensured that class solidarity was never going to reach the heights that it was supposed to. And this was evident through the Employment Act of 1980, which made it harder for trade unions to operate, and also through Thatcher's buying off of the police by giving them a pay rise in a time of public sector wage freezes. And this was all deliberate in effectively making them her private army to take on the miners. And finally, Labour. Now, when Thatcher was asked what her greatest achievement was, she said this man here, Tony Blair, and she's completely right, because since 1994, Labour has not been a left-wing party. It has either been centrist or centre-right. It had a brief return to its left-wing roots under Corbyn, but the reaction both within and outside of the party showed us that Labour would never allow to be left-wing again, and Thatcher is part of the reason. It's when you learn this stuff that you realise how ahead of the curve this guy was when it came to Thatcher, and quite frankly, more of us.
We have a housing crisis. But it's not a crisis for wealthy people or investors. It is a crisis for working people who are just struggling to get by. It's a crisis for young people who can't afford to move out of their parents' homes. A crisis for parents who are forced to cram their families into apartments that are simply too small. I have residents in my ward who are renting places that are not fit for their needs because they cannot find somewhere to move to. And we will not solve this crisis by just building more expensive apartments at the top of the ladder and hoping that the benefits will trickle down to the bottom. We've had decades of trickle-down economics, and all it has done is drive inequality ever wider. So why would we believe that trickle-down housing will be any different? The evidence shows that it is not. In his rush to hit his targets, the Mayor of London seems to have forgotten that housing is not just about numbers. It's about delivering what is actually needed, solving the problems we actually face. If we hit our housing targets, but we still have huge waiting lists for council housing, will that be a success? No, it won't. If we still have young people unable to move out of their parents' homes, will that be a success? No, it won't. And if we can't find suitable homes for people with disabilities or other needs, will that be a success? No, it won't. So what we build matters as much as how much we build, and we need to be ambitious enough to keep the focus on both. Yes, it's hard, yes, there are challenges, but instead of showing he's up for that fight, the London Mayor is capitulating. He is slashing the affordable housing target from 35 to just 20%. That's not leadership, it's surrender. And we are the only party that would give councils the leverage to challenge developers by setting that target for social homes in law, instead of just saying, oh, do you know what, it's not financially viable, we'll let you off. Brent Council should be standing up to the Mayor on this. You should be, because I'm sure you agree we should be building more homes. We should not be giving developers even more freedom to fail to deliver for the people of Brent.
Now let's talk about the biggest scam of all, affordable housing. Politicians love this phrase. They say it in speeches, they put it in manifestos, they plaster it across glossy brochures with smiling families. But what does it actually mean? A flat that costs £400,000, a house that requires a salary no ordinary person earns, a mortgage that eats half your income before you've even paid bills. Affordable for who? For investors? For developers, for people who already own 3 properties, not for the nurse working nights, not for the teacher juggling 2 jobs, not for the student drowning in debt. It's a myth, a marketing trick, a way to pretend the crisis is being solved while the reality gets worse, because building luxury flats no one can afford isn't solving the housing crisis, it's fueling it. It's turning homes into investments. It's turning shelter into profit. It's turning human need into corporate gain. And the people left behind, they're not just struggling, they're angry, they're tired, they're done believing in promises that never deliver. Affordable housing isn't affordable. And until we admit that, the crisis will keep getting worse.
If they wanted to teach you, they would, but they honestly have no intention of teaching you this. This is possibly one of the biggest scandals that we're going to see in the UK in our lifetime. Mistakes have been made. So many mistakes have been made that's put us in a position that, quite honestly, I can't see us getting ourselves out of. We need to have a chat about the UK housing crisis, because we just sit here and accept that house prices are crazy expensive and we're forced to rent into properties, rather than actually looking at how we got into the position that we're in right now. Because when you really look into the details, it is wild. Someone said democracy is pointless if the population don't have an understanding of economics and politics. And I don't know who said it, but I agree with them. And with a general election around the corner, we're going to figure all of this shit out one video at a time. Starting with why no one can afford to buy a damn house. You know, the rest of the world isn't experiencing what we as young people are experiencing in the UK, right? And if they are, it's definitely not on the same scale. Take the US, for example. The amount of people that own properties between the ages of 25 and 34 is 6 percentage points lower today than it was 25 years ago in 1999. Not great, but okay. In Germany, it's down 8 percentage points. That's pretty bad. And in France, it's only down 3 percentage points. Comme ci, comme ça. And you might look at those figures and think, damn, like, we're all in the same boat. Where does the UK sit? Maybe 7 percentage points, 4 percentage points? You would be way off. The UK always strives to be number one, and number one we are. The amount of people in the UK aged between 25 and 34 who own their own property is down 22 percentage points today compared to 1999. And the advice that's always given to young people who can't afford to buy a property to live in by those who were able to buy their property 14, 50 years ago for £5 and a Kit Kat chunky is that young people today need to learn to sacrifice. I don't feel like they want us to enjoy life at all. I mean, what world is it that we live in where we're supposed to remove all of life's pleasures and stay on this one island the whole year round just to be able to afford a place to live? Really and truly, there's nowhere to enjoy life if you live in the UK anyway. Everything's mad expensive and it closes by 2 a.m. I mean, think about it. If we continue to sacrifice anymore, this place that we call home would start to look a lot more like HMP Great Britain. It's so wild to think that young people are expected to sacrifice absolutely everything so they can save up 150% of their salary to put down a 10% deposit on a £500,000 studio apartment in the arse crack of London. But this housing crisis isn't something that's just popped up out the blue. This has been around 45 years in the making. One of the biggest factors that's contributed to the housing crisis is the right to buy scheme, which saw millions of council houses being sold to tenants at a heavily discounted price. They pretty much just started giving them away. Now, councils had been able to sell council houses to their tenants since the Housing Act of 1936. However, you needed ministerial consent. So not everybody and anybody could buy their council house. There were checks and balances. You needed permissions. Then around 20 years later, the House Purchasing and Housing Act of 1959 was put into effect, and you no longer needed ministerial consent. However, you still needed the consent of the local authority if you wanted to buy your council house off of the council. Again though, there was still checks and balances. But in 1980, the year after Margaret Thatcher's Conservative government came into power, the floodgates opened. This was the birth of Right to Buy, which saw the government pass the Housing Act of 1980, which allowed over 5 million council house tenants to buy their council homes at a wildly discounted price. The minimum discount started at 33%, with an additional 1% discount for every year over 3 years that you'd lived there. The maximum discount couldn't exceed £50,000, which today works out to roughly around £200,000. In 1980, 55% of households were homeowners. That number had jumped up to 72% by the early 2000s, which sounds great. People were getting on the property ladder if it wasn't for the fact that no one was building new houses to create social housing for the next generation. In 1979, the UK had around 6.5 million council houses providing affordable housing for those who really needed it. As of today, that number's as low as around 2 million. And you might look to the councils and wonder why they didn't just build more houses, but why would they? I mean, why would they invest in building new social housing just for the tenants to be able to buy them a few years later at a heavily discounted price? The government were hoping that the private sector would pick up the slack and start to build affordable homes for the younger British population, because private companies are so good at putting our needs before their profit margins. The reason you can't get a council house, it isn't because of immigrants and it isn't because of illegal immigrants, it's because the government flogged all the council houses and now your family have nowhere to live. And you, like me, might have thought, well, how has all of this caused the issues that we're seeing today with young people renting everywhere and not being able to buy their own house? With the amount of people that were able to buy their council houses since the 1980s, there should be loads of properties on the market. It should be a buyer's market. The truth is, the Right to Buy scheme never worked out the way that it was supposed to. Over 40% of the Right to Buy homes are now privately rented, meaning the amount of council houses available to those that need them aren't there because they're being rented out to us for astronomical prices. This also means that councils end up having to put people who they would normally put in a council house into a privately rented house and then pay the private landlords part of the tenant's rent. At this point in time, around 1 in 4 private renters in the UK receive housing benefits. Can you deep how much of an own goal this is? I mean, think about it. The council builds a house and puts someone in it that needs some help and charges them a very reduced rental fee. They then sell them that same house at a heavily discounted price. The tenant's happy because they're now in the property market. They stay there for a few years, pay off the little mortgage that they have, and then sell it for a massive profit. The council then deep that they've sold all of their properties and have nowhere to put new people who need social housing. So they end up going to the private landlord who's bought the council house that they sold in the first place for peanuts and paying that person rent at an extortionate rate. This also contributes to the competition that young people are facing when renting, which is why their rent is also crazy high. And some people are having to pay more than the asking rental amount just to be able to secure a property. Now, everything I've mentioned so far is just a part of the issue that we face in the UK as young people trying to get on the property ladder. But it is a very big part. But there are definitely some other pretty big factors. When it comes to buying properties in the UK, there is a massive wealth gap between investors who were looking to buy a property to then rent it out in the massive renting market we have in the UK, and first-time home buyers who've scraped every penny that they can to make up the 10% deposit that they need to buy a house. You also have the fact that there are a lot of property developers that own a lot of land that houses could be built on right now, but they're waiting until the value of the land is at the highest that it could possibly be, so when they do build on it, they can get the most amount of money from the houses that they build. And you can't just build houses anywhere. There has to be jobs, schools and shops nearby just for it to be a viable place for you to live. And councils not allowing certain areas to be built upon in order to preserve the natural landscape of the community. And when you take all of that into consideration, you end up in the situation where we are now, where there isn't enough affordable housing for young people, and young people are stuck either renting or living at home with their parents. And based on the government's research, they believe 300,000 new homes need to be built every single year so that young people can move out of their parents' houses, stop renting, and have a home of their own. Despite this, over the last 10 years, they've only been able to build an average of 178,000 homes every year.
So, after everything we've seen, the rent trap, the myth of affordable housing, the broken promises, the damp flats, the overcrowded rooms, the endless waiting lists, it's not just obvious, it's undeniable. The UK isn't just facing a housing crisis, it's facing a housing betrayal. A betrayal of trust, of dignity, of the very idea that a home should be a basic human right. Because let's be clear, this isn't just about bricks and mortar. It's about lives, it's about families, it's about the quiet desperation of millions who are being punished for simply needing a place to live. People aren't living in homes anymore. They're surviving in boxes, paying half their income, sometimes more, for spaces that are damp, cramped and crumbling. Young people are trapped in their childhood bedrooms, not because they want to be, but because rent is impossible. Families are squeezed into flats with mould on the walls, pretending it's fine because moving is unaffordable. Pensioners are living in houses they can't heat, watching their savings vanish into bills. And homelessness? It's not just visible on the streets, it's hidden in overcrowded living rooms, in sofa surfing, in quiet shame. It's everywhere, just invisible enough for politicians to ignore. Rent isn't just high, it's predatory. Landlords raise prices because they can. Agencies charge fees because they can. Deposits swallow savings because they can. And tenants? They're stuck. Because moving costs money, because deposits cost money, because the system is designed to keep them trapped, so they stay paying more for less. Living in fear of eviction, living in fear of rent hikes, living in fear of being punished for daring to complain. This isn't housing, it's exploitation. It's a rent trap designed to keep people silent, stressed, and stuck. And then there's the biggest scam of all, affordable housing. Politicians love this phrase. They say it in speeches, they put it in manifestos, they plaster it across glossy brochures with smiling families. But what does it actually mean, a flat that costs £400,000, a house that requires a salary no ordinary person earns, a mortgage that eats half your income before you've even paid bills? Affordable for who? For investors, for developers, for people who already own 3 properties. Not for the nurse working nights, not for the teacher juggling 2 jobs, not for the student drowning in debt. It's a myth, a marketing trick, a way to pretend the crisis is being solved while the reality gets worse. Because building luxury flats no one can afford isn't solving the housing crisis. It's fueling it. It's turning homes into investments. It's turning shelter into profit. It's turning human need into corporate gain. And let's not forget the emotional toll. Because this isn't just about money, it's about dignity. It's about the quiet panic of wondering if you'll make rent this month. It's about the exhaustion of living in a space that doesn't feel safe, doesn't feel stable, doesn't feel like home. It's about parents hiding their stress from their kids. It's about couples breaking under financial pressure. It's about young people giving up on the idea of independence. It's about the shame of sofa surfing, the humiliation of overcrowding, the despair of homelessness. Housing isn't just shelter, it's stability, it's security, it's the foundation of life. And when that foundation crumbles, everything else crumbles with it. And here's the hardest truth, the system isn't broken. It's working exactly as designed, because housing isn't treated as a human right, it's treated as an investment, as a commodity. As a way for the wealthy to get wealthier while everyone else struggles, homes are bought, sold and hoarded. Developers build luxury flats no one can afford. Landlords raise rents without consequence. Politicians promise change and deliver nothing. And the people caught in the middle, they're exhausted, they're angry, they're done pretending this is normal. So what do we do with all this? We talk about it, we share it, we refuse to stay quiet, because silence is what got us here. Silence is what lets bad policy thrive. Silence is what allows suffering to be ignored, but it doesn't have to stay that way. Because the more we speak, the harder it becomes for them to hide. The more we connect, the harder it becomes for them to ignore. The more we expose, the closer we get to change. So if you've ever struggled with rent, talk about it. If you've ever been trapped in a damp flat, share it. If you've ever felt cheated by the myth of affordable housing, expose it. Because the more we speak, the more pressure builds. And the more pressure builds, the more chance we have of forcing change. This isn't just a documentary. It's a mirror, a reflection of what life looks like for the people who keep this country running.